Bueno, señores, lunes negro para Estados Unidos. La celebración que acaban de ver fue nada más y nada menos que el cierre del G20 en Sudáfrica. Pero claro, con un detalle brutal. Dejaron fuera a Estados Unidos. O sea que el mundo entero celebrando el G20 y al mismo tiempo dejando claro que Donald Trump convirtió a Estados Unidos en el gran ausente del evento más importante de cooperación internacional. Y claro, hoy quiero explicarles paso a paso cómo es que se llegó a ese papelón histórico y por qué es que la comunidad internacional prácticamente se burló del presidente. Pero bueno, vamos con calma. Resulta que en este G20, al final del evento, siempre se hace una ceremonia donde el país que es anfitrión entrega el mazo, el símbolo del liderazgo, al país que va a presidirlo el siguiente año, ¿no? El país que será el anfitrión en el 2026. En esta ocasión, Sudáfrica debía de entregárselo, adivinen, Estados Unidos. Así es, señores, a Donald Trump. Pero adivinen, Trompetas decidió no presentarse. La delegación estadounidense simplemente boicoteó el evento, inventándose la excusa de un supuesto genocidio blanco en Sudáfrica. Algo que, por cierto, es totalmente falso. Es más, el resto del mundo vio esto como un berrinche diplomático. Sabemos muy bien que Trompetas odia estos espacios de cooperación internacional porque son los lugares donde él no puede controlar la narrativa, no puede imponer su estilo de yo mando y ustedes escuchan. Por eso es que evitó aparecerse en este foro, donde claramente iba a quedar expuesto, sin poder, sin influencia, sin argumentos y bueno, frente a muchos líderes mundiales. Por supuesto, Sudáfrica no se tragó esta excusa. Estados Unidos intentó mandar un funcionario menor, un asistente del Departamento de Estado, y Sudáfrica dijo no. Si no viene el líder, no participa el país. Les ofrecieron una alternativa casi humillante y es, si quieren el mazo, pues bueno, vengan después a nuestras oficinas, sin cámaras y claro, les damos los papeles, nada más. ¿Cuál fue el resultado de esto? Fue algo insólito. Ramaphosa terminó sosteniendo el mazo sin entregarlo, abrazándose de Lula, presidente de Brasil, quien fue el que presidió el G20 del año anterior, mientras toda la sala celebraba. Y básicamente se burlaban de Trump por dejar a Estados Unidos fuera de su propio turno como líder del G20. Pongamos el clip.
That this gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed.
Mientras esto pasaba, los discursos que se estaban dando en paralelo eran prácticamente un roast internacional, en un evento académico al cual asistieron líderes de varios países. El economista Jeffrey Sachs destrozó a Donald Trump públicamente, criticándolo por su berrinche y por debilitar a Estados Unidos en la arena global. Vean el clip.
Why isn't Donald Trump coming tomorrow? Because he has a 4-year-old mentality, and he's having a tantrum. He's having a tantrum. What is the tantrum? That the rest of the world says, we don't want a king. As President Lula said, we don't need an emperor. he would come here as just one of 20 leaders or 21. He doesn't want that. He's having a tantrum. So this rebalancing is happening. He's having a particular tantrum, by the way, because the United States is in a deeply neurotic funk. You know what the cause of that neurosis is? China. A wonderful, brilliant civilization, 4,000 years old plus. It's been a unified state with brilliant statecraft for more than 2,000 years.
Incluso mencionó que, según su análisis, la CIA pudo estar detrás de una explosión en una refinería venezolana que ocurrió horas antes. Él mismo admite que no puede probarlo, pero según él, encaja perfectamente en el patrón de operaciones encubiertas estadounidenses en la región. Escuchen esto.
Today, a major refinery in Venezuela suddenly exploded. That seems a lot like the CIA to me. I don't guarantee it. We don't have any more news. But last week, President Trump said he had assigned the CIA to operations inside Venezuela, and a week later, suddenly the biggest refinery blows up. So the United States can hardly go a week at a time without trying to kill somebody. But China actually goes centuries without attacking its neighbors.
Y claro, siguió con su discurso duro y puro. Aquí tienen otro fragmento, pongamos el clip.
I always emphasize geography in thinking about economics. So the geography is that at Pennsylvania Avenue, which is where the White House is, now there's a west wing and no east wing because he knocked it down a couple weeks ago, this idiot. Excuse me. Sorry, it's true. I'm just being technical. At 16th and Pennsylvania is the White House. 15th and Pennsylvania is the Treasury Building. 17th and Pennsylvania is what's called the Executive Office of the President of the U.S. 18th in Pennsylvania is the World Bank. And 19th in Pennsylvania is the International Monetary Fund. So it's only 2 blocks from the president's office to tell the IMF what to do. You don't even need to text it. It takes 30 seconds to walk across the street to say, veto that country's program. And that's still power. But it's power that is fading. It's fading in part because of the BRICS. Because the BRICS are saying, we don't need to be under the thumb of a U.S. empire. That's what President Lula said when he was hosting the BRICS this summer. And Trump put on a tariff on Brazil because he didn't like a court proceeding against the preceding president who had tried to make a coup. And so he put on a penalty tariff, and President Lula said, we don't need an emperor, and we're not going to succumb to this kind of pressure. So the BRICS, of which you are an esteemed member, the S in BRICS, remember the 10 BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Egypt and Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, and Indonesia. The 10 BRICS countries have 46% of the world population. Thank you. And 41% of the world GDP. And they can look at the G7 and say, who are you? And that's what they're doing. So this is the new phase of geopolitics.
Ahora bien, volviendo al G20, funcionarios sudafricanos reafirmaron que si Estados Unidos hubiera mandado a alguien por lo menos a alto nivel, ¿no? Por ejemplo, al secretario Marco Rubio, pues bueno, habrían permitido, ¿no?, la participación en la ceremonia, pero claro, no lo hicieron, boicotearon el evento, no sé, quisieron minimizar el evento, así que quedaron fuera. Miren cómo literalmente anuncian que Estados Unidos no podrá entrar al cierre del G20. Escuchen el clip.
Now, it's the second and final day. There has to be a handover. That must happen. And from what we've heard from the presidency, it's not going to happen if there's a junior official in the room. I'm not aware if there's been any changes. Are you able to update us what to expect?
So every delegate coming here was registered. There was pre-registration and registration closed. So those who are not in the room have not registered because they chose not to register. But secondly, we have indicated that when we're told, remember, we are a country, things get planned. When we're told that we're not going to participate, we're not going to be there, nobody's going to be there, we had to make alternative arrangements. And the arrangements of today is that we have a closing ceremony and we don't have a handover ceremony. The handover ceremony, as articulated by the Minister of International Relations, will take place in line with what the United States have communicated. The chargé will receive the handover from South Africa, and an equivalent level official at DECO will then hand over to them. You can't have a president handing over to an official, and they are not here. They didn't register to be here. They didn't get accredited to be here because they didn't come on time to be here.
Y aquí tienen otro funcionario explicándolo con mucha más claridad. Pueden venir al DIRCO, pero no esperen ni cámaras ni ceremonia. No van a mandar un asistente a recibir el mazo del G20. Escuchen.
We did not deny anyone access. The United States is a member of the G20, and if they want to be represented, they can still send anyone at the right level. It's the Leaders Summit. The right level is head of state. It's a special envoy appointed by the president of that country. It could also be a minister. And we have always been open, so we have not denied anyone. What we have said, because it's an officials level in terms of that issue, is that DERCO accept the fact that the US is going to be taking over this platform of the G20, and we welcome that they want to take it over. They can come at our offices, and the right level officials will hand over the G20 to the American officials.
So no Minister, access to the charge, do you think?
No, they are allowed to participate, so it's up to them. But the issue of handover, the President of the Republic of South Africa will not be handing over to the charge d'affaires from the US. We will be handing over to the US in the DERCO offices or anywhere they may want us to arrange within the borders of the Republic of South Africa.
Aquí les viene un dato interesante y es que con Estados Unidos fuera, el G20 pues ahora funciona como un G19, ¿no? Y bueno, podría trabajar mejor que nunca porque los líderes lograron acuerdos súper rápidos sobre lo que es multilateralismo, cambio climático, nueva arquitectura financiera internacional. Hablamos de temas que normalmente se traban porque pues Washington impone muchas condiciones. Bueno, en esta ocasión no hubo trabas. Se pusieron de acuerdo desde el inicio, incluso aprobaron la declaración conjunta al comienzo, no al final. Algo único, algo histórico. Y bueno, el mensaje fue clarísimo. Sin Donald Trump, sí se puede cooperar. Aquí escuchen el momento donde Ramaphosa lee la declaración de apertura. Pongamos el clip.
This G20 Leaders Summit has a responsibility not to allow the integrity and the credibility of the G20 to be weakened. In fact, from this summit, we should have a sense that the G20 has been strengthened. We thank all delegations that have worked together with us in good faith to produce a worthy G20 outcome document for this historic leaders meeting. The G20 underscores the value of the relevance of multilateralism. It recognizes that the challenges that we face can only be resolved through cooperation, collaboration, and partnership. The adoption of the declaration from the summit sends an important signal to the world that multilateralism can and does deliver. It sends a message of hope and solidarity across the world. It tells the world that as the leaders of the G20, we will keep fast to our solemn pledge to leave no person, no community, and no country behind.
Luego vimos la foto oficial del G19, todos los líderes juntos, unidos y sin Estados Unidos. Qué contraste, ¿no? Brutal. Y bueno, para que puedan entender el nivel del desastre, recordemos cómo es que se veía la ceremonia en años anteriores. Por ejemplo, cuando Modi le entregó el mazo a Lula en el año 2023. Pongamos el clip.
केवल सौंपता हूं
Y para comparar aún más con Estados Unidos, tenía presidentes que sí participaban seriamente en este tipo de eventos, como el G20, tal y como lo hizo Biden. Miren el discurso que dio en el año 2023. Pongamos el clip.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership that we're talking about today. Building sustainable, resilient infrastructure, making quality infrastructure investments, and creating a better future. A future that presents greater opportunity, dignity, and prosperity for everyone. Last year, we came together as one to commit to this vision. And this afternoon, I want to highlight the key ways in which the United States and our partners are working to make this a reality.
Finalmente, Lula también dedicó un discurso criticando directamente la actitud de Donald Trump y los ataques al multilateralismo y explicando, ¿no?, lo peligroso que es para el mundo. Pongamos el clip.
We have embarked on a path that repeated the recipe of austerity as an end in itself, which deepened inequalities and expanded tensions of authority. Now, protectionism and unilateralism re-emerge as a response to facts and fallacies in the face of the complexity of the current reality, and their effects exacerbate the problems we face. The very functioning of the G20 as a forum for dialogue and coordination is under threat. It is necessary to preserve the capacity of this forum to address the major issues of today. If we are not able to find the way within the G20, it will not be possible to do so in a world in conflict. The historic social and economic problems of Latin America and the Caribbean will not be solved through the threat of the use of force. Without attending to all developing countries, it will not be possible to restore global balance or ensure sustainable prosperity in the long term. There is a negative flow of capital from the countries of the South to the rich countries of the global North. The debt problem of the countries of the global South is ethically unacceptable and economically unsustainable. Almost half of the world population lives in countries that spend more on debt service than on health or education. We are now entering a new stage that will require a simultaneous effort on two fronts, accelerating actions to address climate change and preparing for a new climate reality. The G20 plays a central role in both. The group is responsible for 77% of global emissions, and it is from the G20 that a new economic model must emerge. The group is a key actor in developing a roadmap to move the world away from fossil fuels. Climate change is not simply an environmental policy issue. It is, above all, a challenge of economic planning. Priorities are inverted. It is inconceivable that we are unable to mobilize $1.3 trillion in climate financing, while twice that amount is consumed in military spending.
Todo esto pasa mientras el BRICS sigue ampliándose, señores, siguen fortaleciendo esta influencia global que tienen, justamente porque pues países como Estados Unidos, bajo el mandato de Trump, deciden retirarse, ¿no?, del liderazgo internacional. Tal y como lo dijo Sach, cuando una potencia actúa movida por neurosis, por caprichos, otros son los que llenan el vacío. Sin duda, uno de los discursos más potentes fue el del primer ministro de Singapur, hablando de un nuevo orden mundial, el cual ya está en movimiento. Pongamos el clip.
For decades, the rules-based multilateral system anchored by the WTO provided this stability. But the system is now under severe strain. One reason is that the system has been optimized for efficiency in a different era, and it has not caught up with the realities of today's world. Realities like digital trade, as well as the fact that interdependencies are increasingly being seen as vulnerabilities and are open to being weaponized or used as leverage in moments of dispute. Understandably, countries are taking actions to protect themselves and to prioritize resilience and security. Yet, if every nation goes its own way, the global system will unravel even more quickly. And when that happens, everyone will be worse off. And the heaviest burden will fall on the developing nations. So we do need to reform and update the global system to ensure it addresses the strategic realities of our time. First, we must recommit to the core foundations which remain relevant today, and that means upholding international law and the norms and practices that guide state behavior. That is critical to continued peace and stability in the world. Second, we must reform the current system, be it the WTO or other global institutions. We cannot be paralyzed by old ways of doing things. We all have to get behind the urgent reforms that are needed in the WTO so that it becomes more effective and outcome-oriented. We should complement the WTO with flexible multilateral approaches, and that's why Singapore supports minilaterals and plurilaterals, which can serve as important pathfinders towards updating global rules. Third, we should build new partnerships, and as several colleagues have talked about just now, we are making progress with partnerships and dialogues between the CPTPP and ASEAN, as well as the CPTPP and the EU. In fact, 2 days ago, ministers came together and had a very productive trade and investment dialogue covering issues like trade and investment facilitation, digital trade, and supply chain resilience. In the same regard, we should look at ways in which we can bring the free trade areas and free trade blocks in Africa closer with Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Recently, Singapore also joined with other countries.
Y claramente, no podía faltar el primer ministro canadiense Mark Carney, siempre impecable. Habló sobre resiliencia, sobre cooperación global, recordándole al mundo lo que significa un liderazgo serio. Pongamos el clip.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to follow the Australian example. Let me start. This session is on resilience, and I want to join others who pointed out in the first session the fragility of armed conflict, condemning the Russia's illegal, unjustified, and barbaric invasion of Ukraine, the appalling conflict in Sudan, and our support for all efforts that can lead to just and lasting peace. Now let me speak to climate change. It's been over a decade that we've realized that past is not prologue with respect to climate change. In other words, the tail risks of yesterday become the central scenarios of today. Tipping points are now being realized. And I want to give an example. 2 years ago, the forest fires in Canada alone made Canada the 4th largest emitter of carbon in the world. We have the example of the Darwin cyclone. Last year, or this year, forest fire damage forests bigger than Sierra Leone, to give orders of magnitude. So we need action on all levels: mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. International collaboration is crucial. I want to thank our hosts, South Africa, Mexico, and others who sent firefighters to Canada to help fight the fires. Coordination through early warning systems. The wildfire satellite system that we're putting in place as part of the G7, global public good, the work of the G20 in disaster risk reduction. Nature-based solutions. We're working towards our 30-30 commitment under the Montreal Kunming Protocol. I want to support the Tropical Forest Financing Facility of Brazil's COP, as well as the broader effort, and congratulate them on that. In terms of our own mitigation, I'll just frame it as follows. We view addressing climate change as a moral duty, but also a commercial imperative, as Prime Minister Albanese just intimated. So our strategy on reducing emissions is a climate competitiveness strategy because it will make our businesses stronger.
Realmente histórico, señores. Un G20 muy distinto. Y nos demuestra cómo Trump está aislando a Estados Unidos. Y otros países se están aprovechando para llenar ese espacio. Normalmente esto casi no se cubre en los medios estadounidenses. Pero creo que es clave, ¿no?, para poder entender esta nueva dinámica global. Por eso es que quise hacer este video. Pero bueno, espero sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.